My mother threw me out like yesterday's trash to build a studio for my sister-in-law, but she forgot that I'm the only one who holds the digital keys to the family business. The Samsonite zipper screamed as my mom yanked it across the gravel. Diane didn't look at me. She just grabbed a fistful of my scrubs and pitched them into a black husky trash liner. I stood there, my toes aching in my non-slip kitchen shoes, the smell of burnt hazelnut and old dishwater clinging to my skin from the double shift I just finished. "You're 24, Scarlett," she muttered, her hands moving fast. "Julian and Carol need this space. Carol needs a studio for her vlogs. You're in the way." A hot, sharp pressure built behind my eyes, but I forced it down, my throat feeling like I'd swallowed a dry sponge. Behind the glass of my second-story window, I saw Carol. Her French manicured nails were already picking at the edge of my old wallpaper. My brother, Julian, stepped over my laptop bag, his shoulder clipping mine without a word. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just watched my life land next to the recycling bin and realized they'd just evicted the only person who knew the passwords to their survival. Stick around, because by the end of this story, you'll find out exactly what happens when the person they called a burden stops holding their world together, and why my mother was left standing on my doorstep 2 weeks later, begging me to save a business that I had already decided to erase. The Uber smelled like stale cigarettes and those chemical cherry air fresheners that make the back of your throat itch. I sat pressed against the door, my forehead cold against the window glass, watching the streetlights of our neighborhood blur into long, yellow streaks. Every time the car hit a pothole, the black husky trash bag at my feet shifted with a heavy plastic crinkle. That bag held my favorite sweaters, my degree, and the extra pair of work shoes I'd bought with my first official paycheck from the diner, the one Diane actually let me keep. My stomach felt like a cold, wet knot. It wasn't just empty, it felt like it had shrunk to the size of a walnut. By the time the car pulled up to the curb downtown, my legs were buzzing with a dull, pins and needles numbness. I dragged the Samsonite in the trash bag out onto the cracked sidewalk. The air here was different, sharper, metallic, tasting of bus exhaust and damp concrete. Apartment 4B was 3 flights up. I gripped the plastic ties of the trash bag until the skin on my palms turned white and felt like it might tear. My non-slip shoes squeaked on the linoleum stairs, a rhythmic reminder of the grease-slicked floors I'd spent 12 hours pacing earlier that day. I didn't have to knock twice. Nia pulled the door open, the light from her hallway spilling out over me. She was wearing an oversized gray hoodie with a Coastal Grind logo faded across the chest, her hair pulled into a messy knot. She didn't say a word. She just looked at the trash bag, then at my face, and her jaw tightened. She reached out, grabbed the heavy Samsonite, and pulled me inside. The apartment was small, the kind of place where the kitchen sink is 3 steps from the foot of the bed, but it smelled like clean laundry and expensive coffee beans. The heat was cranked up, hitting my face like a warm hand. "Take my bed," Nia said, her voice low and scratchy. She kicked a stray sneaker out of the way to make room for my bags. "I'll take the couch. Don't even think about saying no." I dropped the trash bag. It hit the floor with a dull thud, the contents settling into a lumpy pile. I tried to speak, to say thank you or tell her about the look on Carol's face when she touched my window frame, but my throat was too tight. It felt like I'd swallowed a handful of dry sand. I just nodded and sat on the edge of her mattress. The springs groaned under me. Now that I wasn't moving, the adrenaline was draining out of my system, leaving me heavy, like my bones were made of lead. My lower back throbbed with a rhythmic ache that pulsed every time my heart beat. I stared at my hands. They were stained with the faint yellow shadow of turmeric from the brunch special, a color that wouldn't scrub off no matter how hard I tried. The reality of being homeless didn't feel like a big, dramatic realization. It felt like the silence in the room. It felt like the weight of my laptop bag against my hip. I reached down and zipped open the side pocket of my MacBook case, my fingers trembling just enough to make the zipper snag. I pulled the silver machine out and set it on my lap. The metal was cold against my thighs, biting through the thin fabric of my work pants. Nia set a mug of water on the nightstand and squeezed my shoulder. Her hand was warm, but I couldn't lean into it. If I softened even an inch, I knew I'd fall apart, and I couldn't afford to be broken yet. I had too much to do before the sun came up. I flipped the lid of the laptop open. The glow of the screen hit my eyes, sharp and sterile in the dim room. My pulse started to climb, a steady thump-thump in the hollow of my neck. I wasn't just Scarlett, the daughter who was in the way. In this digital space, I was the gatekeeper. I clicked on the browser, my mouse hovering over the saved passwords for Valley's Family Diner. The fan in my MacBook started to whir, a low, steady hum that vibrated against my tired thighs. The room was dark, save for the harsh blue glow of the screen reflecting off my glasses. My eyes felt like someone had rubbed them with fine grit sandpaper. I took a sip of the water Nia lent me. It was lukewarm and tasted like the plastic cup, but it helped clear the dry stickiness in my throat. I opened the first tab, Instagram, at Valley's Family Diner. I stared at the grid. I'd spent 3 years curating those photos, the steam rising off a hot plate of biscuits, the golden crust of the Saturday pies, the way the morning light hit the counter. I'd staged every shot. I'd written every caption. Diane and Julian just saw it as Scarlett playing on her phone. They didn't see the 6,000 followers. They didn't see the fully booked messages in the DMs. I clicked Settings. My mouse hovered over linked accounts. It was my personal business email, the one I'd used since college. My finger clicked once. Disconnect. A little white wheel spun for a second, and then it was gone. The diner's profile was no longer tethered to my digital life. I wasn't deleting it. I wasn't burning it down. I was just taking back the light I'd brought into their dim little world. My heart hammered against my ribs, a fast, shallow rhythm. I moved to DoorDash. This was the one that really paid the bills. Julian didn't even know the merchant portal existed. He just knew that a bell rang on the tablet and money appeared in the bank. I logged in with my master credentials. I went to the payout settings and the user permissions. I removed my admin access, but first, I changed the primary contact to the generic diner landline, the one nobody ever answered. Every click felt like a surgical cut. I wasn't angry anymore. I was cold. My hands were freezing, the tips of my fingers white and bloodless as they danced over the keys. I moved through Yelp, Google My Business, and the email newsletter I'd built manually, name by name, regular by regular. "What are you doing, Scar?" Nia's voice was a sleepy rasp from the couch. "Taking my keys back," I whispered. My voice sounded thin, like paper tearing. "Good," she muttered, shifting under her blanket. "They don't deserve the air you breathe, let alone your talent." I didn't stop. I went to the website I'd coded from scratch. I downloaded a full backup of the analytics, the proof of what I'd built. I saw the peaks in traffic every time I ran an ad. I saw the heat maps of where people clicked. I saved it all to an encrypted folder titled The Case Study. By 4 a.m., the back of my neck was a solid wall of tension. A sharp, stinging pain radiated from my shoulder blades down to my tailbone. I'd spent 12 hours crouched over this machine, undoing years of invisible labor. Diane always said she was too old for this internet stuff. Julian told me that social media doesn't flip burgers. Fine, if it was so worthless, they wouldn't miss it. I looked at the final tab, the Meta Ad Manager. There was $50 left in the weekly budget I'd set with my own credit card. I paused the campaign. I unlinked my card. I watched the status change from active to inactive. Outside the thin blinds of Nia's apartment, the sky was turning a bruised, watery purple. The first city buses were beginning to groan through the streets below. My stomach did a slow, heavy flip. In 2 hours, the diner would open. The tablet wouldn't log in. The specials wouldn't post. the world would keep turning, but for Valley's Family Diner, the internet was about to go dark. I closed the laptop. The silence that followed was heavy, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a clean slate. The glass door of Coastal Grind was heavy, cool to the touch, and didn't have a rusty bell to announce my arrival. Instead, a blast of air-conditioned oxygen hit me, carrying the sharp, bright scent of freshly ground Ethiopian beans and lemon zest. It was a world away from the thick, greasy fog of the diner. My lungs felt like they were expanding for the first time in years, clearing out the lingering ghosts of burnt hazelnut and bacon fat. I sat in the corner on a backless stool, my spine screaming from the night spent on Nia's floor. I bought the cheapest black coffee on the menu, $4 for a small cup that tasted like berries and earth. I watched. A guy in a crisp linen shirt took a photo of his avocado toast. A woman with a sleek bun was typing furiously on a laptop that looked much newer than mine. They were young, they had money, and they were the exact demographic I'd been luring to my mother's diner through sheer digital willpower. I pulled my phone out. My thumb hovered over the Instagram app. Habit is a hard thing to kill. I almost checked the diner's notifications before I remembered. I wasn't the gatekeeper anymore. I searched for Coastal Grind's profile instead. It was beautiful. Professional photos, perfect lighting, but it was cold. No one replied to the comments. No one was engaging with the regulars. It was a museum, not a community. A slow, hot crawl of excitement started in the pit of my stomach. It was a physical itch, a restless energy that made my leg bounce under the high table. I knew these people. I knew what made them click share. And more importantly, I knew exactly what my mother's diner was missing now that I was gone. I didn't finish the coffee. I walked back to Nia's apartment, my non-slip shoes feeling heavy and wrong on the city pavement. I needed to change. I needed to shed the skin of the diner girl. Back in the apartment, the sun was cutting through the cheap blinds and sharp, dusty needles. I sat on the floor, the MacBook's aluminum casing cold against my knees. I opened the folder I'd named the case study. I didn't just have ideas, I had receipts. I started a new document. I didn't write a resume, I wrote a manifesto. I pulled the data from the CSV files I'd saved the night before. I made a graph, bright, aggressive lines that showed exactly when the diner's revenue spiked. I matched the dates to the campaigns I'd run. Tuesday taco special, 45% increase in foot traffic. Saturday pie reveal, 110% engagement rate. I showed the before and after. Before me, the diner was a ghost town with a closed sign. With me, it was the top-rated brunch spot in a 3-mile radius. My fingers flew across the keys, the rhythmic clack, clack, clack filling the small room. I wasn't thinking about Diane throwing my sweaters. I wasn't thinking about Carol's manicured hands on my window. I was thinking about the marketing coordinator job posting Nia had shown me on Coastal Grind's website. By midnight, I had 20 pages of proof. I had a strategy for Coastal Grind that would turn their museum into a powerhouse. My eyes were bloodshot, and my stomach growled with a hollow, echoing sound. But I didn't feel tired. I felt sharp. I felt like a blade being honed. I hit save. I attached the PDF to an email addressed to their general manager. I stared at the send button. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my chest, beating against my ribs. If I sent this, I was officially declaring war on my family's business. I wasn't just leaving, I was competing. I took a deep breath, the air tasting like Nia's laundry detergent, and clicked. The message sent notification popped up, a tiny white box that felt like a bridge burning behind me. I closed the lid of the laptop and let my head fall back against the wall. The silence was absolute, and for the first time, I didn't mind it at all. I wore Nia's black blazer over a plain white tee. The shoulders were tight, digging into my skin every time I moved, and the fabric smelled faintly of her citrus perfume. It was a sharp contrast to the smell of old fry vat oil that usually lived in my pores. I stood in the center of Coastal Grind, my hands shoved deep into the blazer pockets to hide the way my fingers were shaking. The floor was polished concrete, cold and gray, reflecting the overhead industrial lights. A tall man with deep, tired lines around his eyes emerged from a side door. He wore a simple navy apron over a flannel shirt. "Scarlett, I'm Blake." He didn't offer a hand for a fake corporate squeeze. He just jerked his head toward the back office. "Bring the laptop." The office was a glass-walled box that smelled like fresh ink and unflavored oxygen. He sat behind a desk cluttered with invoices and a half-eaten protein bar. He didn't ask me about my hobbies or where I saw myself in 5 years. He just pointed at my MacBook. "Show me the back end of the diner's Meta account. Show me the conversion rates you claimed in the email." My heart gave a heavy, jagged thud against my ribs. I opened the lid. The silver metal felt like ice against my palms. I navigated to the analytics folder, the digital heart of Valley's Family Diner that I'd carried out in the dark of the night. I turned the screen toward him. Blake didn't look at me. He didn't even look at my resume. He leaned in, his eyes darting across the graphs and the heat maps. He scrolled through the engagement metrics for the Saturday pie reveal and the Tuesday taco special. His thumb tapped a rhythmic beat against the edge of the mahogany desk. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the muffled hiss of the espresso machine through the glass. My stomach felt like it was filled with lead weights, sinking lower with every second he stayed quiet. "You did all of this?" he asked. His voice was flat, professional. "The photography, the ad buys, the response scripts, everything," I said. My voice was steady, even if my knees weren't. "I built the customer list from zero. I negotiated the delivery fees with the third-party apps. I handled every negative review before it could touch the rating." Blake finally looked up. He didn't smile, but the tension in his forehead eased. He picked up a pen, a heavy metal Parker, and scribbled a number on a yellow legal pad. He slid it across the desk. My eyes stung when I read the digits. It was a base salary that was nearly triple what Diane had allowed me to take from the diner's register, plus a performance bonus, plus health insurance. I felt a flush of heat rise from my chest to my cheeks. It wasn't just money, it was the sound of a door locking behind me. "We've been bleeding regulars to your mom's place for 18 months, Blake said, leaning back. The chair creaked. "Now I know why. I don't care about your family drama, and I don't care that you're 24. I care that you know how to make people hungry through a phone screen." He stood up, towering over the desk. "I need a content calendar by Monday. I need our delivery range expanded by Tuesday. And Blake?" I paused at the door, my hand on the cool metal handle. "Yeah? Don't look so surprised. People usually get paid when they're the ones keeping a business alive." I walked out into the main cafe. The air felt lighter. I could feel my pulse settling into a slow, powerful throb in my neck. I wasn't a burden or a maid. I was a marketing coordinator. As I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped onto the sidewalk, I pulled out my phone. I didn't check the diner's page. I didn't check for texts from Diane or Julian. I just felt the sun on my face and the weight of the laptop bag on my shoulder, the only tool I needed to build a world they weren't invited to. The door to 4B swung open, and Nia practically vibrated with news. She smelled like steamed milk and the rainy sidewalk. She didn't even take her coat off before she collapsed onto the couch next to me, her damp windbreaker making a sticky, crinkling sound against the fabric. "I saw Mrs. Gable from down your street," Nia said, her eyes wide. "She was at the grind today. Apparently, your old house looks like a construction zone." I kept my eyes on my laptop, but my heart started a slow, heavy thud in my ears. I didn't want to care. I wanted to be a ghost to them. But curiosity is a sharp, jagged thing. I could feel the skin on the back of my neck prickle. What kind of construction? "A studio, Scar. They're ripping everything out. Your old curtains? In the trash. The blue paint? Sanded down. They're putting in white oak floors and a full wall of mirrors with those built-in LED vanities." Nia leaned in, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret that tasted bad. "Mrs. Gable said Julian was bragging about it at the hardware store. He called it an investment. They took out a $10,000 business loan to fund Carol's brand." The air in the room suddenly felt very thin. I felt a cold, dry laugh bubbling up in my chest, but it stopped in my throat, turning into a bitter ache. $10,000? That wasn't just money, that was the safety net I'd built. That was the surplus from 3 years of me negotiating with suppliers and slashing the waste in the kitchen. It was the money Diane always said we needed to keep for a rainy day. Apparently, the rainy day was Carol needing better lighting for her skincare routines. 10,000? I finally said. My voice sounded flat, hollow. For a room that used to hold a bed and a desk? And a professional contractor, Nia added. They're fast-tracking it. Julian told the neighbors that once Carol starts posting from the valet studio, the diner will be so packed they won't know what to do with the crowds. He thinks her 500 followers are going to save the business. I looked down at the spreadsheet I was working on for Blake. I was currently looking at the data for Coastal Grind's new loyalty program. Real numbers, real people, real growth. Across town, my family was betting the farm on a ring light. The physical reaction was strange. I didn't feel sad. I didn't even feel angry. I felt a cold, clinical sense of detachment. It was like watching a car heading for a wall in slow motion. You want to yell, but you know the driver has already let go of the steering wheel. Diane, who used to count every penny when I asked for a new blender for the bar, was now signing away the diner's future so Carol could film Get Ready With Me videos. They're going to drown, Nia whispered. Let them, I said. My thumb traced the edge of my trackpad. The metal was cold, biting into my skin. I thought about my old room, the small dent in the baseboard where I dropped my heavy marketing textbook, the way the sun hit the desk at exactly 4 p.m. It wasn't a room anymore. It was a prop, and the people inside that house were no longer my family. They were just characters in a story I was no longer writing. I turned back to my screen. I had a campaign to launch. The valets were busy spending money they didn't have, while I was busy making sure they never saw another dime of my talents again. I hit the publish button at exactly 6 a.m. on Sunday. The blue light of my phone screen felt like a physical weight against my tired eyes. My thumb was stiff, a dull ache throbbing in the joint from hours of editing clips of pouring cream into dark, swirling cold brew. The air inside Coastal Grind was crisp, a sharp contrast to the humid, heavy heat of the morning outside. I stood by the front counter, my fingers tracing the textured edge of the new Sunrise Sunday flyers I designed. They were thick, matte-finished cardstock, nothing like the flimsy, grease-stained menus Diane refused to replace. I'd placed a small wireless Bose speaker in the corner, and the low, honey-thick sound of a tenor sax began to fill the room. Blake watched me from the espresso machine. He didn't say anything, but I saw him adjust the collar of his apron. He looked nervous. I felt a cold knot of anxiety tightening in my own stomach, right under my ribs. This was my gamble. I wasn't just selling coffee, I was selling a reason to leave the diner behind. "Flights are ready," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I'd spent the last 3 days perfecting the presentation. 3 small chilled glasses on a reclaimed wood board, 1 nitro cold brew, 1 lavender-infused latte, and 1 signature Gold Coast blend with a sprig of burnt rosemary. By 8 a.m., the first bell chimed. It wasn't the rusty clink of the diner's door. It was the heavy, muffled thud of the Grind's glass entrance. I looked up. My heart skipped a beat, a sharp flutter in my chest. It was Mr. Henderson. He'd been a regular at Valet's for 10 years. He always ordered black coffee and 2 slices of dry toast. "I saw the post on the gram," he said, squinting at the menu board. He looked out of place in his weathered fishing cap against the clean, white lines of the cafe. "Said you were over here now, Scarlett." "I am, Mr. Henderson. Try the flight. It's on me today." I watched him take a sip of the lavender latte. His eyebrows shot up. He didn't complain about the price. He didn't ask why I wasn't at my mother's counter. He just sat by the window, tapped his fingers to the jazz, and pulled out his phone to take a blurry photo. By 10 a.m., the shop was humming. The line stretched to the door. I recognized more faces, the local real estate agents, the teachers, the Saturday morning joggers. They were the people I used to greet by name across a laminate counter. Now they were tagging Coastal Grind in their stories. I stepped into the back office for a second to breathe. My palms were damp with sweat. I checked the analytics on the new campaign. The engagement line was a vertical cliff, climbing higher with every minute. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a notification from Instagram, not from our account, but a tag. I clicked it. It was a photo of a half-empty coffee flight. The caption read, "Found Scarlet, the vibes at Coastal Grind are 100 times better. Sorry, valets." A rush of heat flooded my face. It wasn't the satisfaction of revenge, not yet. It was the feeling of power. For years, I'd been told my work was just playing on the phone. Now, that play was draining the lifeblood out of the diner and pouring it into this glass and steel room. I could almost feel the silence growing in my mother's kitchen across town. The eggs would be sitting on the grill, the coffee would be getting bitter in the pot, and Diane would be staring at the door, wondering where everyone went. I smoothed my hair, tucked my phone away, and walked back out to the floor. I had more people to welcome home. I sat in the back office of Coastal Grind, the air-conditioned chill raising tiny bumps on my forearms. My laptop was open, but I wasn't looking at my new spreadsheets. I was looking at a ghost. I pulled up the Google My Business listing for Valley's Family Diner. A small gray shield icon sat next to the name with a question. Own this business? Claim it now. A cold, sharp shiver traced my spine. Because I had unleashed my professional email, the digital heartbeat of the diner had flatlined. To the internet, the diner was now an orphan. My phone buzzed on the desk, a notification from my recovery email. Alert, someone is attempting to reset your password. I watched it happen in real time. 3 times, 4 times. I could almost feel Julian's greasy thumb stabbing at a tablet screen across town, his face turning that blotchy, frustrated red he got when he couldn't get his way. He was hitting a wall he didn't even have the tools to climb. I scrolled down to their Yelp page. It was a bloodbath. A 1-star review had been posted 20 minutes ago by a regular named Sarah. Drove 20 minutes for the Sunday pie special. The doors were open, but the staff looked confused. No one knew what the special was. They said the online stuff was broken. Won't be back. I felt a heavy, leaden throb in my stomach. It wasn't guilt. It was a somatic memory of being the one who used to catch those bullets. I used to spend my mornings smoothing over those exact cracks before they became craters. Now, the algorithm was doing exactly what I knew it would do. It was burying them. When a business stops engaging, stops replying, and stops updating, the search engines start to treat it like a corpse. I switched tabs to their DoorDash merchant portal. I could see the public-facing menu. It was a mess. A glitch had set the prices for the steak and eggs to $0. Without me there to fix the back-end integration, the system was eating itself alive. I imagined Julian behind the counter, the order tablet chiming a high-pitched, frantic warning while he stared at it like it was an alien language. I imagined Diane in the kitchen, screaming for a ticket that would never print because the cloud server was locked behind a password she'd called useless 2 weeks ago. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could fix it in 3 clicks. I could log in, reset the prices, and save them from the $100 loss they were about to take on those breakfast orders. My heart hammered against my ribs, a fast, panicked rhythm. Then I remembered the trash bag. I remembered the scent of the driveway gravel. I remembered my mom's voice saying I didn't deserve to be there. I closed the tab. The silence in the office felt thick, like I was underwater. Across town, the renovation on my old room was probably nearly finished. $10,000 of white oak and LED mirrors, all meant to house a brand that didn't exist, while the actual business, the one that paid the mortgage, was being erased from the map one bad review at a time. The Valleys had a studio now, but they didn't have a voice. I leaned back in my chair and took a slow, deep breath of the expensive, citrus-scented air. The blackout wasn't something I was doing to them. It was the silence they asked for when they told me to disappear. The vibration of my iPhone on the marble counter was a sharp, aggressive buzz that rattled my teeth. I was in the break room at Coastal Grind, the air smelling of clean linens and the expensive, earthy scent of roasted hazelnuts. I just finished a 6-hour stretch of data entry, and my eyes were heavy, the lids feeling thick and grainy. I reached for my phone, expecting a text from Naya about dinner. Instead, the name Diane Valley glared back at me from the lock screen. My stomach dropped, a cold, oily feeling like I'd swallowed a spoonful of old grease. My heart didn't race, it just gave one heavy, hollow thump against my ribs and then settled into a fast, shallow drumbeat. I swiped the screen. My thumb left a faint, damp smudge on the glass. "What is the password to the Instagram and the DoorDash?" the message read. "Julian can't get in. It says it's locked. Carol finished the renovation today, and she needs to post the renovation reveal. People are asking why we're not responding to messages. Send it now." I stared at the blue bubbles. I waited for the 3 dots to appear. I waited for a second message to follow, something like, "Are you okay?" or "Where are you staying?" or even, "I'm sorry about the driveway." The screen stayed white. The only thing moving was the clock in the corner, ticking away the seconds while my family demanded the keys to a house they'd already kicked me out of. A hot, prickly sensation climbed up the back of my neck. My jaw was clenched so tight, my molars ached. They didn't even realize they were asking for my labor. To Diane, the Instagram was just a box you typed words into. To Julian, the delivery portal was a magic money machine. They didn't see the hours I'd spent on the phone with support reps, the nights I'd spent learning the algorithm, and the fact that every single recovery email was tied to my personal business account, the one they'd never paid a cent for. I looked out into the cafe. I could see Blake through the glass door laughing with a regular as he handed them a perfectly crafted latte. The contrast hit me like a physical blow to the solar plexus. Here, I was an asset. At home, I was just a password they'd forgotten. The renovation reveal. I could picture it. The $10,000 white oak floors and the LED vanity mirrors I'd heard about. They had spent the diner's survival fund on a stage for Carol, and now they were surprised the lights wouldn't turn on without me. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The haptic feedback of the phone felt like tiny electric shocks against my skin. I could feel the power in my hands. The literal digital bloodline of their business was sitting in my encrypted vault. I didn't feel like a martyr anymore. I didn't even feel like a daughter who had been asked to work for free by people who didn't know my name. "Scarlett?" Naya's watch broke the silence as she walked into the break room, her brow furrowed. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't look up. I just watched the screen go dark, the reflection of my own tired, cold eyes staring back at me in the black glass. Not a ghost, just a bill that's finally come due. The morning sun hit the front windows of Coastal Grind in sharp, blinding sheets of white. Through the glass, I watched the line. It didn't just fill the shop, it snaked out the door, down the sidewalk, and past the brick corner of the flower shop. People were checking their watches, but they weren't leaving. They were looking at their phones, scrolling through the Sunrise Sunday post I'd scheduled 3 days ago. Inside, the air was a thick, buzzing hum. The frantic shh of the steam wand, the rhythmic thump of the portafilter hitting the knockbox, and the low, steady rumble of 100 conversations. I stood at the end of the bar, my hands steady as I checked the inventory on the iPad. My stomach felt calm, not the shaky, acidic emptiness I used to feel every morning at the diner, but something solid, heavy. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket, one long, aggressive vibration. I pulled it out. The screen was covered in notifications, 6 missed calls from Julian, 2 from the diner's landline, and a final text from Diane that made my thumb pause over the glass. "The tablet is frozen, Scarlett. We have 10 people in the lobby demanding the online special, and the system says we don't exist. Carol is crying. The contractor is here for the final payment on the studio, and the business card was declined. Stop being a child and fix this, now." I looked at the line of people in front of me. I saw Mr. Henderson at a small table, eating a poached egg and nodding along to the jazz. I saw the data on my screen. Coastal Grind was on track for its biggest day in 3 years. I thought about the $10,000 vanity mirrors. I thought about the white oak floors being laid while the bank account was being bled dry by $0 steak orders and ignored customers. My chest didn't tighten. I didn't feel that old panicked urge to jump in the car and save them. My pulse stayed slow, a rhythmic drumbeat in the back of my skull. I typed 3 words. Build your own. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't wait for the typing bubbles to appear. I tapped the I in the corner of the contact, scrolled past the family photos and the years of one-sided demands, and hit block. I did the same for Julian. I did the same for the diner. The phone went silent. The weight of it in my hand felt like nothing more than a piece of glass and plastic. "Scarlett, we're out of the rosemary sprigs for the flights," Naya called out, her forehead shiny with sweat as she moved between tables. "On it," I said. I slid the phone into the back pocket of my jeans and stepped behind the counter. The cold metal of the fridge handle felt real. The scent of the fresh herbs I'd bought with my own salary was sharp and clean. Across town, the valet studio was probably finished. The lights would be bright, the mirrors would be perfect, but the room would be silent. Without the digital bridge I'd built, the customers wouldn't come, the orders wouldn't print. The $10,000 stage was set, but the theater was empty. I spent the next 6 hours in the weeds. My back ached, my feet burned, and my ears rang with the sound of the rush. But every time I moved, I felt the space I had created for myself. I wasn't the help. I wasn't the smart one kept in the back to fix the things the real adults didn't understand. When my shift ended, I walked out the back door and leaned against the brick wall. The city air was cooling down, tasting of rain and damp pavement. I looked at the Coastal Grind logo on the window. I had built this. I owned my time, my talent, and my peace. My family thought they were throwing away a burden. They realized too late they had thrown away the engine. I stood there for a long minute, listening to the muffled sound of my new life continuing inside. And then I started the walk home to an apartment that was finally, truly mine. The 10 a.m. rush at Coastal Grind was a machine I'd helped build, and right now it was humming. The air was thick with the scent of roasted Awaken beans and steamed oat milk, a clean, sharp smell that never made my eyes sting like the diner's grease traps did. I was behind the La Marzocco machine, my hands moving in a blur. Lock, tamp, brew, pour. My back didn't ache the way it used to. The constant low-level static of anxiety that had lived under my skin for years had finally gone quiet. I slid a latte across the marble counter and caught Naya's eye. She was clearing a table, moving with a rhythm that matched the upbeat indie folk playing over the speakers. Then the heavy glass door swung open. I felt the shift before I even looked up. The air-conditioned chill was suddenly pierced by a smell I knew in my marrow: stale fryer oil, cheap vinyl, and the sour, metallic scent of a panic attack. My heart gave a jagged, heavy thud against my ribs. My fingers went cold. The blood retreated to my core as I looked up. Standing on the polished concrete floor, looking like gray stains on a white shirt, were Diane, Julian, and Carol. My mom wore her faded maroon diner polo, her hair a frantic, frizzy mess. Julian stood next to her, his jaw working a piece of gum like he wanted to bite through it. Carol was a step behind them, her head down, her French manicured nails picking at the sleeve of an oversized sweatshirt that said Creator in gold foil. The shop seemed to go silent, though the music kept playing. Diane didn't look at the menu. She didn't look at the line of people behind her. She marched straight to my station, her eyes red-rimmed and wild. "You blocked me," she said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation that tasted like iron in the air. "I'm working, Diane," I said. My voice was level, but my pulse was a frantic drumbeat in my throat. "If you want a drink, the line starts back there." Julian leaned over the counter, his shadow falling across my workspace. He smelled like old bacon and sweat. "Don't play games, Scarlett. The tablet is a brick. DoorShad won't even let us log in, and the Google listing says we're permanently closed. You need to fix it, now." "I don't need to do anything," I said. I gripped the cool steel handle of the portafilter to stop my hands from shaking. "I told you, those accounts are mine. I built them. I paid the hosting fees. You told me I didn't deserve to be in your house. Why would I keep my work in your business?" "We're family," Diane's voice cracked, rising into a high, thin whine that made a couple at a nearby table look up from their laptops. "We're losing thousands, Scarlett. People are leaving one-star reviews because no one answers the phone." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear, but I didn't see an ounce of regret. She didn't miss her daughter. She missed her IT department. She missed the invisible girl who made the money appear while she flipped burgers. You spent $10,000 on a vanity studio for Carol. Maybe she can vlog a tutorial on how to rebuild a brand from scratch since she's the creator now. Carol flinches, her face turning a blotchy red. Blake stepped out from the back office. He didn't say a word, he just stood next to me, a tall, silent wall of support. His presence felt like a physical shield. Julian looked at Blake, then back at me, his face twisting into something ugly. "You're a selfish brat," Julian spat, slamming his hand onto the marble. A ceramic dripper rattled on the shelf. "You're going to let the family legacy rot because you got your feelings hurt?" "I'm not letting it rot, Julian. I'm just not the one holding it up anymore. You want the passwords? You want the algorithm to love you again? Figure it out. Call support. Wait on hold. Do what I did for 3 years while you told me I was playing on my phone." I looked at Carol, whose perfect LED-ready makeup was starting to run at the corners of her eyes. "Nice manicure, Carol. Hope it looks good in the dark when the power company cuts the lights." I turned my back on them. I felt the heat of their anger like a physical burn on my shoulders, but I didn't turn back. "Naya," I called out, my voice clear and sharp. "Table 4 needs a light. These people are done." The silence that followed was heavy. I heard Julian mutter something foul, and then the clumsy, loud sound of their shoes squeaking towards the exit. The heavy door thudded shut. The smell of grease vanished. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles white and bloodless. My knees felt like wire, but the weight in my stomach was gone. I took a deep, shaky breath of the expensive, citrus-scented air. I wasn't a daughter today. I wasn't a sister. I was a professional who had just closed a very bad account. I picked up the cloth, wiped the smudge Julian had left on my counter, and started the next order.